Mehdi Hasan has been making progress in shifting Piers Morgan's views on Israel, and this week he seemed to have done it again.
Piers, you asked me a question at the beginning. It was a great question. Put yourself in Israel's shoes. We should always have empathy for whoever it is, enemies, allies. Let me ask the question back to you. Put yourself in the shoes of an Iranian official sitting in Tehran today who looks at a map of the region and sees Israel with nukes, Russia with nukes, Pakistan with nukes, India with nukes, nuclear-armed America next door in Iraq. Wouldn't you want nuclear weapons? I'm against nukes.
Yeah, but if
put
you're
yourself in that
regime,
person's position.
Mehdi,
if you look at,
Mehdi, you wouldn't dispute.
would you not think it's rational to have nukes as a
my response
protection?
would be this: you wouldn't dispute that Iran's tentacles have been fueling for a long period of time Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and I presume you wouldn't also dispute that the tactical attack on Hezbollah through the pages, 3,000 of them targeted in a very precise way, that has led to Hezbollah basically throwing the towel in and saying we're not going to get engaged in this war with Iran, which is a very significant moment in this whole war, I would argue.
If your question is, has Israel degraded Iran's supports abroad, its proxies, 100%. That's irrelevant to the rightness or wrongness of this. I'm asking you to put yourself in the position of an Iranian
proxies want to kill Israelis,
government.
Right? So that's why I think that Israel has a right.
Let's not get... Well, as you've agreed, Israel's doing much of the killing right now.
So I suppose what Mehdi Hasan was trying to get Piers Morgan to do there was something called strategic empathy, right? Which is putting yourself in the sort of mindset of the side that you don't necessarily most easily identify with. I think clearly anyone who's sort of seen Piers Morgan over the past 2 years, yes, he's recognized that Israel is behaving horribly, but he clearly finds it much, much, much easier to identify with the Israeli side. You know, the way he talked about October the 7th, even though he is now to some degree outraged about what's going on in Gaza, he doesn't talk about the two sides the same, and that's because he struggles to empathize with the side that isn't allied to the West, let's say. And Mehdi Hasan is saying, take a minute. You're saying Israel feels under threat. Imagine being Iran. Iran already has this neighbor with nuclear weapons that's bombing it. Why are you so, I suppose, blinkered that you can only see the Israeli side? It gets more interesting, and I think this is the next part is really where actually Mehdi Hasan just completely wins the argument. Let's take a look.
Ukraine gave up nukes, got invaded. Saddam Hussein gave up nukes, got invaded and executed. Gaddafi gave up chemical weapons, got invaded, raped and killed. Again, if you're the Iranians, are you not looking at this thinking, this means we need nukes? I would rather not give them an incentive to go get nuclear weapons. I'm anti-nuclear weapons for anyone. So I don't want Iran to have nukes. But the best way for Iran not to have nukes is not to attack them. That makes countries want to have nukes more. It's just rational to go, oh, the countries who have nukes like North Korea, they don't get invaded. So why give them an incentive to get more nukes? Why not actually have a weapons of mass destruction-free region? You know which country does have nukes in the Middle East? Israel, in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. You know which country doesn't allow IAEA inspectors into the country? Israel. You know which country hasn't signed the NPT, unlike Iran? Israel. We should talk about Israel's nuclear weapons, which actually incentivize others in the regions, not just Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, to think about nuclear weapons of their own. I'd rather not have more nukes in the Middle East with anyone.
Such a good point. Really difficult to disagree with it. And guess what? Piers Morgan struggled to disagree with it. And he tweeted afterwards, in fact, legitimate questions. Why is Israel allowed to refuse to admit it has a large nuclear arsenal? Which it does. I mean, it's such an obvious point. I was listening to the Today program on the BBC today, and they had this about 8:10. So sort of like their main segment was talking to all these people in the Israeli establishment about why they're so worried about Iran. And never once did the host or any of the guests mention that Israel already has a nuclear bomb. So it was all about, how close is Iran? Are they developing nuclear weapons? Is this an existential threat to Israel? And they never, ever mentioned Israel has nuclear bombs. And I suppose I just encourage you, anytime you're watching mainstream media about this, right? And I'm always reluctant to sort of tar all of the mainstream media with the same brush because so often I rely on their reporting, right? We don't have that many reporters. We don't have people who go out to war zones, right? So I rely on the establishment legacy media. I have a New York Times subscription. But it's especially on foreign policy issues like this, where I just think it's so patently obvious how they're failing. And I ask you, whenever you're watching, the BBC News at 10, listening to the Day program, listening to LBC, right? And they talk about whether or not Iran is developing nuclear weapons, just listen really carefully. Have they bothered to inform their audience that Israel already has nuclear weapons and just hasn't told anyone? keeps it a secret. Mehdi Hasan, of course, laid out well why Iran might want nuclear weapons, but are they actually close to developing them? Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency currently says there's no concrete evidence they are. US intelligence says Iran would be years away from having nuclear weapons if they wanted them. That's what Tulsi Gabbard said in March. And the only person consistently saying they're about to get nukes is Bibi Netanyahu. And as this clip from The Daily Show expertly demonstrates, he's been saying that for 30 years.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
So in 1995, he said they'll be capable of developing nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years. We're in 2025. They haven't created any nuclear bombs. The International Atomic Energy Agency says they don't seem to be close to it. I mean, we've got no evidence they're actually got a weapons program in the first place. Yet the world's media has sort of decided that they're going to take Netanyahu seriously and say that, oh, maybe he is actually bombing this country because he believes in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which he himself hasn't signed up to. Stephen, I thought that clip from The Daily Show was very well put together. Are you feeling gaslit by some of the coverage of the nuclear dispute when it comes to Israel and Iran?
Oh, my God. Look, I mean, my first question is, why is it The Daily Show that's put together that compilation and not the BBC or CNN or any of the other kind of mainstream broadcasters who actually would be doing their audience a huge service by saying, we can take the temperature down a bit because this dude has been saying this for 30 years and none of what he said has come true so far, so why would we believe it now? But instead, they're really entertaining the claim of that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. I mean, like, they're entertaining mad things like Tzipi Hotovely, talking about how they have missiles that could hit the UK, or even Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they're very close to having missiles that could hit the US. I mean, nobody believes any of that, and yet it just sort of is entertained and debated as though it were a debatable claim, when we actually do have, as you already said, the IAEA, US intelligence coming out and saying they're not in a position to develop those weapons. And it is giving dodgy dossier. It's giving 45 minutes. All these 2003 claims that were used to manufacture consent for the invasion and regime change in Iraq. So just given that history, which every single journalist knows, every journalist knows what happened in the lead up to the Iraq War. It's amazing that they're still kind of entertaining this claim as kind of seriously as they are, and not really reflecting in any way on the fact that we've been here before. So yeah, I think the coverage has been disappointing, but I sort of also think that's kind of the function of some of that media. The function of that media is to, if necessary, bolster support in the population for a disastrous adventure.